Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Learning Curves. I am very excited today with my next guest who's here with me, Miss Kelly Abanda. And she is a life coach and owns a company called Design Your Details. And I am really excited. I met Kelly probably a couple months ago, and we bonded at a Girl Boss event. And I just loved her so much, and we started talking, and I just thought she would be great for the show because she fits in well with a lot of things that are going on in my personal life. And I know I have a lot of listeners here that are friends of mine that would also really get a lot from what we're gonna talk about today and on the show. So I'm really excited to have you here, Kelly.
I'm so excited to be here. We're going to have a great time.
Yes, we are. We have two Kellys always have fun together.
Listen, if you've got two Kellys in the room, you better watch out. We're going to have such a good time.
That's right. So Kelly, can you first start off by telling me, you have such a great story. I love this because Kelly had a corporate job and she worked in the corporate life for a long time, then went into charitable organizations where you worked for. And then from there, she decided to take some time off to travel. And how many of us ever think about doing that? I mean, that is so cool. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started and what you're doing now?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, I looked at other people who did what I was able to do. And before I did it, I always thought, how do you pull that off? How do you go travel instead of doing what you're supposed to do, which is like have a job and be stable? How do you do that? But in my own journey, so before I made that big leap, I've made several transitions in my life. We talked about my career has not been one straight path for my whole adult life, and that fits my personality. But I thought I had been, in a place where I was getting really stable. I was in a senior leadership position, making great money, and was figuring out what the next step was for me. So I'd gotten my master's degree and checking all the right boxes. We've all been there, right? Like I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, but wasn't quite happy. And I was looking at my next big goal of buying a house in Los Angeles, which was a big deal.
That is a big deal.
So really,
houses in Los Angeles are expensive.
Yes. And
how long ago was this?
This was like 8 years ago.
Okay.
So even 8 years ago, it was a lot of money.
Yeah, always been expensive there.
Yes. So for one person to do that, but I was saving really well to get to that place. But I stopped at one point and I thought not just about the goal of buying the house, but the life that would come after I reached that goal. Because it's a good goal. Owning a house is a good thing. Having equity in where you live is a good thing. Like I wasn't trying to do something bad in the world, but when I realized beyond that goal, I would have actually ended up making a decision that would have tied me to jobs that I wasn't loving because I would have needed the money. A $600,000 mortgage for a single person is a lot of responsibility, plus all the things that happen when you own a house.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of financial responsibility
that
comes along
it's
with
not
that
just
house.
like, oh, buy a house and now you get a bunch of extra money.
Right.
No, it's the opposite, right? So I looked at the life after that and I was like, I don't actually want that life. But I hadn't been honest with myself about that before. But when I let myself have that space, when I really listened to what was happening on the inside of me, I knew I had to make a different decision. And nobody was going to make my life better except for me. I couldn't wait around for some knight in shining armor in any form, in a perfect job, in a perfect spouse, in a perfect whatever, to change my life. I had to do it. So if I wasn't happy, what was I going to do? So I asked myself what else I would love to do. And I had always wanted to take I had done a little bit of a spontaneous trip around Europe after I graduated from college. And I always wanted to do something like that again. So I was like, well, why not now? There's never going to be a better time. We always think like, oh, later is going to be better. But later comes and it's never better. It's never easier. It's never more convenient.
No, a lot of people wait until they're older. And when you're older, you can't walk as well, have a hard time making it around.
Exactly.
So,
that's exactly what I thought. I was like, what if I wait and then I can't actually enjoy it? Or by that point, I don't even want to do it. So I quit my job. And I went to travel. I was going to only travel for 3 months. So I just sublet my apartment and then came back after 4 months and knew that I was like, I'm not done yet. So I basically got rid of everything that I owned, including my car. and I got rid of my apartment, which was harder than leaving the job because it was a rent-controlled apartment in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, those are hard.
Oh my goodness. I knew I'd never get that back.
Yeah, especially when they have the rent a certain price.
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
So I got the courage to do that, and then I went back to traveling, and I traveled for almost 4 years total. So it was because all these magical things happened that I trusted good things were going to happen instead of believing bad things were going to happen, and then I got what I believed. Magical things happened. My budget should not have lasted 4 years, but there were a lot of miraculous things that happened along the way, but only because I was willing to take that leap and do something that was scary.
Yeah, that's because did you work at all when you were gone?
I mostly didn't work. I did start my coaching business toward the tail end of that, but while I was traveling, I really was mostly just traveling and enjoying. There were a few places where I did like in exchange for room and board. So I would contact nonprofits and say, hey, listen, I could do executive coaching. I can do strategic planning with you, whatever. I took my background and offered that in exchange for room and board. But otherwise, I wasn't earning income
4 years.
for 4 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. And this was 8 years ago. So I think that's, and it's like the prime of your life too, you know, where you have a lot of energy and you're still feeling good, and to be able to take 4 years right there in that time period is something so many of us just don't do. I think more people might have started thinking about that with COVID and job flexibility recently, but that's just really awesome.
It was so great. But what I say to people too, like if you make it work in your life to do something that big, that's great. But also you can make a lot smaller changes and find more happiness and satisfaction in your life, even without quitting your job and traveling the world. Like that's great if that's what works for you. But I actually find a lot of the clients I work with, even if they think that's what they want when they first start working with me, we discover that what they really want are smaller tweaks to their current life. The thing that's the truth for either situation is deciding that it's time for you to make the change in your life that you really want, instead of waiting for it to be a better time later or waiting until you're not afraid at all. There are changes you can make even without that drastic piece. But why keep living a life if it doesn't make you happy? If you wake up every day and you're feeling like, why is this my life? I worked really hard to get here, but I don't like it once I'm here. Why do you keep doing it? We're the only one, like if you feel like that, you're the only one that can change it.
Yeah. So I know like probably most everybody, I'm sure, comes to a point in their life where they feel like they should make some type of a change. And some people just might I can't do it. I'm just going to keep doing what I know and keep going through. Others of us like might try, you know, and kind of stumble through the process of it all and then have some type of regret in the end. So do you have any advice for those of us that are thinking like I think I'm ready for this, but I don't really know how to get there?
Yeah, so I have a whole structure that I call the 3L system that runs through 3 L's, and we can go through those to help all the listeners have something to grab onto. Like if you're hearing this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I know that I want to change, but I don't even know where to start. Or I know this is happening. I know that something needs to shift, but I don't even know what it is yet. These 3 things will help you really get started so that you don't just stay in that place of feeling stuck.
I think that's what we all need and this podcast is to give us 3 things.
Yes.
I need 3 things.
Yes. 3 things are great,
Okay.
right? It's also a manageable amount of things.
Yeah, it's manageable. Like anything more than that, it's like, okay, that's too much.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I can do all that.
I think that's really smart, especially because this podcast is mostly for business owners and we're already crazy overwhelmed all the time anyway. So
Yes.
3-step process, I think sounds perfect.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. And
Okay.
this fits really well. Like whether you're a business owner or you're working for somebody else, it doesn't matter. Maybe in your business, you're thinking you want to make a shift in what you're doing, what you're focusing on in your business. You can think about these same 3 steps and it will work for you too. So wherever you're at, these will help. So the first one, you ready for the first one?
Ready for the first one?
Okay. So the first L is listen. So
Listen.
listening is not just about listening externally. That's part of it. So It's about listening to what cues are happening inside you and around you that would tell you now is the time to make a change. So an internal prompt might be like, I wake up every day, or every Monday I have the Monday dreads, or whatever words you want. Like, you wake up on Monday and you're like, oh, I got to do this again. Okay, just suck it up and keep going and make it happen. If you're feeling like that, that's an internal sign. Listen to that internal voice that's saying something needs to change. You should not wake up most days dreading what's about to come. Anything you decide to do may not always be like, I wake up like, oh yeah, I get to do this today. But it should be more often like, oh, I'm excited I get to do this, versus, oh, I have to do this again.
Right.
So that's an internal voice that you might notice is telling you it's time to change. Listen to it. You have to, in order to really listen, we have to slow down. So I know this is going to be the hardest thing probably for people that are listening to do, is to slow down.
I think that's my hardest thing, is to
Yes.
slow down. I keep piling more on top of it.
Yeah. Well, it's easier because that's what we know to do.
Yes.
Right? So we are always, it's like a rut in the road. Your car's always going to go back there. As humans, we do the same thing. We're going to go back to what is most comfortable, even if we know it's not the best or we would like it to change. It's just what we do. It's not because something's broken or bad. It's just human nature, right? So we want to just do the things that are comfortable. So if you're used to like just being in constant motion, it's uncomfortable to not be in constant motion. The thing about it, taking that space, is sometimes the fear about taking the space is like, oh my gosh, if I give that space, I'm afraid of what's going to come out, or I'm never going to want to start taking action again. I'm going to want to just stay in that space of slowing down. But that's a fear. Our brain is so powerful, and it tells us stories that we start believing as truth.
It tells us stories that the fear gets in the way of a lot. Because
yes.
I know, like, when I was going through a big change after I got divorced, and then right away I started dating somebody else, and that started not working out. I'm like, okay, now I had to find somebody else right away, because it was like this whole thing with me that I ended up finding out about myself, is that I was in all these relationships, but I had a fear of being alone. Like, I didn't want to be alone. Whenever I was alone too much by myself, I'd be kind of, going crazy. Yeah. And not knowing like how to deal with it, Yes. And then I end up finding out later, after the third time around, that what I really needed was some time to really enjoy me and having time with me, which I didn't think was possible for me to enjoy being with myself. Yeah. And funny, like, fast forward to now. I took some time off that time for like a good year, and then I think it opened myself up to meet who I am with today. And awesome. Now I love, he's just getting ready to move in, and I'm like, my husband, I'm like, I kind of liked it the way it was. I like my time now, where before I was like freaking out all the time. Like, I wanted somebody around me all the time. And now I'm like so comfortable with having that time alone. So it's interesting.
That's so powerful. So first, I just want to say, Kelly, congratulations, because a lot of people, and probably a lot of people listening, have not taken those steps. Like, we might know the way I'm doing it isn't working. You knew that it wasn't working the way you were doing relationships, but you didn't have to acknowledge it and make a change to do what was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable at first to be by yourself. You didn't know that a couple years later you'd be like, actually, I like my alone time. I like this. Yeah. You didn't know you had to take that first step. You had to leap into something that was scary.
Oh, you do, and it also helps you set up those boundaries for yourself with like having those conversations with, I'm not comfortable the way you're talking to me like this, or, I'm not comfortable with this or that, and being able to have open conversations instead of internalizing everything and then having it just come out in a really bad way. So yes. That's what I learned during that time period.
Powerful lessons. And those are, think about too, when you said, I think that opened me up to meet the person who was the good person for me. You also, in that season, were learning to love you in a different way. When we love ourselves in a different way, like in an authentically different way, not a toxic positivity, love yourself, just be happy with who not that. Yeah. But like when you really get to know like who you are, the pluses and the minuses, and you can find ways to love that person, you show up differently in the world. And then other people receive you differently. So you find the kind of person who's actually a better fit for you.
Yeah, you can receive love, because I don't think if you're not happy and love yourself first, you're really not capable of receiving love. And people, I feel so bad because you can go through your whole life being like that.
And never know.
And if I wouldn't have taken that time for myself, like I would still be that same Kelly that's just a wrecking ball of everything and every
I'm coming
relationship
in.
I go through.
I love this. We could have a whole podcast just
Yeah,
about this whole subject,
can.
right? It's
Yes.
so true, though. Fear keeps us back from so much. And I think sometimes we're afraid to do that pause because we don't know what might come up in the pause. But I want to encourage everybody. I promise you, if you take it doesn't have to be like I spend a whole year. It could just be I'm going to take one Saturday and spend a couple of hours thinking about what are the signs about, is there a change I need to make right now? These internal and external things. I'm just going to slow down and listen and write it all down. It doesn't have to be really complicated or long or drawn out. And it's going to feel better than you think it's going to feel. But you have to slow down and listen if you're going to make the kind of change that you really, in your heart of hearts, in your soul of souls, that deepest part of you, that they really want that change, that deepest part of you really wants the change. You're not going to actually make the change if you don't first get really quiet and listen.
Yep, quiet and listen. Like I shouldn't be like overpiling stuff on myself right now because of all the big change, going from a bigger company to a smaller. And I've been having a lot of personal challenges with that. So,
Of
and an
course.
internal battle.
Of course there's going to be, it makes so much sense. Of course, any kind of change like that, again, is just human nature. It's not like, oh, Kelly's flawed and she is getting it all wrong because she doesn't, change is hard. No, change is always hard. We as human beings want to be in comfort and control. So anything that seemingly threatens that feels hard. We're afraid of it. And it's because I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be out of control. That's almost at every fear, that's the core. Something is making me uncomfortable. Something is making me feel out of control.
So a piece of advice comes from that is to tell us to slow down a little bit.
Yes. So that the first of the 3 L's is listening. And in order to listen, you have to slow down.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's number 1.
Okay. Now what about number 2?
Number 2 is to let go. So you start by listening, you identify all the things that are telling you about the change you want to make. Now with let go, the second step, you think about what are the things that I need to let go of in order to move into this new thing. So again, you have internal and external factors. So if you're going to change your career, you might have to look internally and go, oh, okay, well, I need to change. I have this expectation internally that tells me I can't make that change because it's not what everybody else does. I have an expectation that I'm supposed to be moving up the ladder, not off the ladder or whatever. You have to, what are the internal things you need to let go of? What fears are there that you need to be able to say, I want to let go of these? And externally, sometimes there are relationships we need to change or boundaries we need to draw in order to create space for that change. So the letting go step is thinking about and identifying all the things that you want to let go of in order to create space for the change that you want to make, internally and externally. So that's step number 2. You ready for 3?
I'm ready for 3. Well, one more thing on the
Yes.
letting go. So I know for someone like me, there's just so many things. So I guess you have to like sit down there and figure out, what do you let go of first?
So
And how do you get there?
So we'll get there. Actually, step 3 is going to help with that.
Okay.
So good. That's a good lead in. But I think this is a great question. I'm so glad you're asking because a lot of people will be thinking that. So what you're voicing what listeners are already thinking. Oh man, if I do that, I'm going to have a list of 700 things and I can't let go of 700 things at once. So what do I do? In this step of letting go, you're really just identifying the pieces. So don't even worry yet about what to do with them. If you allow yourself to start thinking, oh, but like it's going to be too many and what am I going to do? You're going to stop yourself from being honest about all the things that you want to let go of.
Okay.
So
That's good advice.
postpone for this step, postpone like how. You're just thinking about the what.
Okay.
Don't think about how yet. because how gets most of us stuck in action. So we're thinking about all of the, oh my gosh, but I'm at point A and I want to get all the way to like Z. That's a long ways. There's a lot of things in between A and Z. That's too much. I don't even know that I could do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you find that a lot with people that, okay, that's an overwhelming part for me, because I know I'm like that. I like to fast track myself through everything if I can.
Yes. Well, 100%. And also because like we attract the kind of people that we are, right? So I've always been an overachiever who's like expects myself to do things like 10 times faster than other people, and to be like, I find all the shortcuts and get to the end as fast as possible, right? These last 8 years of my life have really helped me to embrace a slower, more intentional way of growing. And that's also a shift. It can be hard to be like, I just want to be at the end goal. But if you think about, so if I was coaching somebody who said, but I just want to be, like it's taking too long. There's too many things. It's taking too long and I just want to fast forward. I'd want to dig in and say, okay, what are the stories you're telling yourself about the pace you have to go at, or what it means about you if you can't get it done so quickly? What are you letting influence whether or not you stay on the course or not? And finding those things. So instead of just looking at the behavior, it's looking at what's driving it. Our behaviors are always driven by things happening in our brain, most of the time subconsciously, that we're not even aware of. So having somebody from the outside, this is why coaching is really helpful. Statistics actually show how much
having
difference.
Some accountability, and
yeah.
I know with me, like along with like all those things, like I have severe ADD, and I have a lot of other, distractions that go on. And when you're ADD, like I am, it's just you're constantly feeling that I have to be doing something, and or you're a nervous wreck. But the more you pile on, the more anxiety driven you become, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
It's such a vicious cycle, isn't it? It's such a vicious cycle. And then we're telling ourselves stories, right? I'm also ADD, so I totally identify with that. And when those things happen, we're telling ourselves a story. So like, oh, if I don't do so many things, what's going to happen, or who am I going to be, or what's the reflection of me as a person if I'm not constantly busy, or I'm afraid if I stop doing these things that are good, I'm afraid I'll fill my time with something that's not good. Right? Like if I don't take on another project, I'm going to binge eat, or if I don't do this other thing, I'm never going to get out of bed and just watch TV all day. Like there's a story happening along with the neurological things that are going on. Our brain is such a powerful thing, and we're always then, and this could be a whole nother episode of us talking about it, but your brain, like when people think about like manifestation, there can be like a resistance because of like, oh, if you just think about something that is good in the future, you're helping to create it to happen, right? But here's where I push back on that. I'm like, I imagine, have you ever had a negative thought about something that might happen in the future, and it feels so real?
I do all the time.
Yes. Right? Like you start to feel in the present moment as if that really bad thing is already happening.
That's what turned me into an alcoholic smoker at nighttime.
Yes. Because you're like, oh my gosh, that
I'm
anxiety.
Like, well, this is what's going to happen.
Yes. Like this is what is going to happen. And now you're responding in the present as if that possible future is true right now. And that's all happening from your brain.
Yeah.
So
So
if
my
that,
husband's like, stop thinking about what might happen. Like, let it go, let it go. I'm like, I can't let it go.
if only it was that easy, right? If only it was
Yeah.
as easy. You're just like, you know what? You just zip it over there. I'm smart enough to know that if I could just turn it off, I would. That's not the only thing happening here, right?
Yeah.
But it's like you think about, you can identify. I only said a few words and you lit up like, I know exactly. I know that feeling.
Yes.
I can feel it in my body. So the same thing in reverse for positive things. What we're describing here was like a negative situation that you can start to feel in your body as if it's already happening. If you can do that with negative, you can do it with positive. So you start thinking about what could go right with something. If you really allow yourself to go there, you can start feeling like that positive thing is already happening right now.
Yeah.
If you let yourself. Our brain is ready to do either one of them. How we direct our thoughts makes the difference.
That's right.
So
Get the little evil guy and the
exactly.
angel. They like to fight against each other all the time.
Yes, and usually because of how we learn how to do things in this world, usually the negative voice gets more power.
Yeah.
And we even start to think that negative voice.
We give it more power.
Yes. And we think things like, oh, I have to be hard on myself, otherwise I won't be productive and I'll be lazy. We'll think things like, but I have to be critical of myself because otherwise something bad's going to happen. We've learned how to, we think at least, use that negative voice for our good. But what's happening is that negative voice, it's good. We shouldn't get rid of negative voices altogether. But think of it like I'm putting my hand on a hot stove. I want the feedback that that's not good. I want to move my hand. But if we stay in the negative, it's like keeping our hand on that hot stove.
Or sometimes I'll set up a whole story in my head and visualize exactly what's going to happen to prepare myself. Okay, I'm preparing myself for this awful thing that's going to happen. And I go through every scenario of that awfulness.
Yes.
Just so, and I stay awake thinking of it and like prepare myself for like, okay, this awful thing is going to happen to you so you can be ready and be prepared for it.
Yes, that's a perfect example,
I do
Kelly.
that all the
It's a
time.
perfect example because
I think
pattern.
I'm so clever of like, I'm so good for doing this, but I'm just
Yes.
driving myself personally crazy because of it.
Yes, but those are hard patterns. They are hard
Yeah.
patterns to break, but they are breakable. So we'll talk at the very end about a resource I have for people that is like a first step and like dealing with those pieces. It's really hard to just shut those off. What we try doing usually is like even bullying the bully voice. So the bully voice is stepping in and being like, you better think about all the bad things so that you're ready because we don't want you to fail or to be in a bad position or, to whatever the voice is thinking is preventing you from. Like, it's so present. So that's all happening. Like, oh my gosh, I got to do this thing. There's another voice inside your head. It just doesn't ever really get space. That negative voice is the only thing that you know. It's the rut. It's the rut for the car to go to. I only know how to create the right feeling of comfort, the right feeling of control, if I let this negative voice be my guide. So we all have these judge voices. They show up a little bit differently for each person, but we're judging ourselves, we're judging other people, we're judging what's happening around us, and we do it all the time. Judgment itself isn't bad. It's when judgment now is like keeping our hand on the hot stove instead of being like, you know what? I am at the core of this. The reason that I keep myself up thinking about all these things at the core of it is because I don't want to be in a situation where I fail or where I'm caught off guard or where I can't fix it.
Yeah.
So if I think about it ahead of time, I won't have that problem.
I'll make it even before I go somewhere or do something where I think I'm going to be uncomfortable. I've already made up like 10 different scenarios of what could possibly happen before I even get there to prepare myself for that.
Yes.
Because I try to tell my team, I'm like, you don't realize how like introverted I am. I'm like a very deeply introverted person. And they're like, no, you're not, because they're used to seeing me at work. I'm like, no, you have no idea. Like I'm like very much like on edge like all the time.
So that at the core, there's
Not
something.
all the time, but certain things,
circumstances bring that out. So at the core, what is that like? Thinking of all those scenarios ahead of time, what does that prevent you from experiencing? Like,
I think it prevents allowing to have true joy come in and really being able to enjoy a situation overall, because even when you're at a certain place or doing something, those things are shooting through your head.
Yeah.
And
It's
just, I just can't even believe I'm even admitting this in front of other people right now.
Don't put a coach in front of you. We make you say things.
What's happening, but I'm like a sick person. I think that's crazy. But I think that it brings on more anxiety, and it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I can be uncomfortable a lot. Not always, like if I'm doing something like in my business, if I'm pitching or if I'm around my clients and I'm like in my thing that I'm like, know that I'm in my good space, where I feel great. And then there's other situations where I've like created this whole drama before the drama even happens.
You're not broken. I don't know what word you just used to describe yourself, but it's not true. Whatever negative thing you just said, like, oh, this is like what, it's not true. You're human, and you are doing the very best for the skills and the tools that you currently have. You're doing your very best to not have to face whatever it is. Like, what do you think, thinking through all the scenarios ahead of time? Like, I appreciate that you're realizing like, oh, I'm probably not present or having joy in the moment because I'm always then anxious. But that voice thinks it's doing something protective. So what is it protecting you from?
I mean, I know where I know where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to make you say it. I'll just say things that could be for people.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it'll be like, oh, I don't want to look foolish, or I'm afraid I'm not going to fit in, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to know what to say when somebody asks me a question. So I'm going to rehearse before I get there.
It just, I mean, I was highly dyslexic as a child, and you feel stupid when you're in the classroom, and the last thing you want to do is, please don't call on me, don't raise the hand, I want to crawl under the desk now, and I don't even want to be here, so so you put yourself when you're in that type of situation where you're feeling uncomfortable and not worthy of where you are, where other people are, you tend to like start coming up with all these different scenarios. And you also, your imagination, when you're somebody like that, tends to go wild and starts feeding you a lot of information. But I think what it does is it's protecting you.
Yes.
Because you feel protective, you feel out of place. So I think ever since I was very little, I've always felt, and now I feel out of place. I shouldn't, because I'm like, highly successful, good person. I have a ton of friends. I have the really best life. People probably look at me and like, you have the best life, but like inside, it's not always like that, you know, because myself is telling me that you need to like worry about all this stuff.
Yes.
So then I'm trying to be more open about it now, because I want to try to help other people that are like me, because it kind of sucks a lot of times to feel like that.
And also, I so admire that you're being open about it and recognizing, because really, I can guarantee you there are people listening right now that go, oh, she feels like that too? I would have never guessed. Oh my gosh, I feel seen. I feel like, oh, it's not just me. Because when we have those feelings of, oh, I'm not going to fit, it's not going to work, I'm going to feel dumb, whatever it's going to be, like, again, our individual voices might be different, but so many people feel that same way of, oh, behind the scenes, I'm really not as confident as you might think. I'm really not as comfortable as you might think. I'm really not as assured, or whatever it is. Something's happening under the surface. I kind of paint
myself when I'm out. I walk into the room and I go to these different events and I'm around people. I'm even on social media. I'm not the person that like posts negative things. I just choose not to. Yeah. And who would know? Yep.
Who would know? But you're letting people know, and that's really brave. It's really brave to do that.
I just think it's important that people know, and it's important to help. There's so many people that I think are struggling with this. I think the last night I went to the flip-flop event with Eileen and Allie, and she was talking about, how 70% of the population is depressed and on some type of medicine, or has some type of anxiety or something going on. And I don't know, I'm 55, and I just think that there's so much more than everything I've gone through. I just want to be able to I need help myself, obviously, and to feel better, because I want to live the rest of my life feeling more present and feeling good when I'm out and about, and not feeling like I'm like this a lot of times. You know, like nobody knows that, but I'm like just not feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's not because of anybody else. It's all because of me.
Yeah. It's what's happening in your brain, which is a powerful tool. And the great news about that is just as powerful as it's keeping you hostage, learning some new skills will help you to not feel so held hostage, because, you know, as somebody who is on the outside of you and love everything that I have gotten to know about you, I'm like, I don't want you to be walking around feeling like, oh, nope. There's a disconnect between what people think and how I'm feeling, or what they feel about me and how I feel about myself. Like, no, I don't want that. You wouldn't want that for me either, right?
No.
Because there's a freedom in that. Like, there's a bondage right now, and there's a freedom on the other side. But you talking about it openly, even before you're getting help for it, or like getting whatever it's going to help to get to the other side of it, that's also a big part of breaking through that bondage, because you're not, there's a shame when we feel like I can't talk about it. And that's what a lot of people feel.
Well, it's like when you've always been told no your whole life. No, don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know, it's always like, that's been my life, or you're not good enough, or, you know, you can't possibly do this. You can't possibly, you know, that's the whole thing that goes inside my brain. So it's always, you know, and the thing is, I've been very successful because of those no's.
Yes.
You know, because thank God I wasn't going to accept that.
Yep.
But at the same time, you always get, you know, I guess there's always some damage that comes along with it that you have to address. And you can say, okay, well, I'm going to go through the rest of my life and not talk about it. Or I can talk about it and be like, you know, I think the people that really step up and start saying something, I guess that's the first step to maybe trying to make things better.
Yeah.
And if people judge you because of it, then, oh, well, you know.
I honestly think, like, if anybody were going to judge hearing that vulnerable, open way that you just shared, anybody who's going to judge that, it's probably because they are not themselves ready to share what they actually feel. It's not because what you're sharing, it's a reflection of them.
Yeah.
100%.
Usually when people are gossiping or talking bad about somebody, it's because they have some bad trash inside of them that they're not happy with.
Yes.
You know, I'm starting to realize that too. Like, you know, you should really feel bad about, you know, what those other people are saying, because there's some type of crap that they're going through.
Yeah.
And that's why they're like that. So therefore forgive them and let it go and move on. I'm trying to get better with that. I'm not there yet, but
we're all on a journey.
Yeah.
We're all on a journey, but all the things you're doing are the exact right things. So anybody who's listening, just know, like, find a place where you can say, this is what's really happening behind the scenes, and I don't always feel comfortable, and I don't feel like my insides match my outsides, and this is happening and I don't know what to do with it. Like, letting it out is like the very first powerful thing, so that you don't feel like, I'm doing this alone, I'm doing this by myself, nobody else feels this way.
And I think sometimes too, it's like, I think a lot of times, because I've recently been reaching out during different groups and to different people and starting to talk about this, and, you know, signing up for resources to help me. And part of my brain's like, Kelly, you're 55 years old. Like, are you really going to change? I mean, just whatever. You know, you're not going. You're old. You know, you've been too channeled. You've been like this all your life. Like, really, you know. But I'm like, you know what? I want to live my best life moving forward. I want to be free.
Yeah.
I want to be free of this, because I'm tired of it. So, you know, now's my time period to do something about it. Because if I don't do something now, another 10 years goes down, and I'm 65, then I'm 75, and then I'm dead, you know, after that. So.
Exactly. Well, then it goes
Because I think you have time to live your best life at any time if you choose to.
Yes. Yeah. Why are we waiting? Like, we talked a little bit earlier about, like, if you put off going to travel until you retire, which is what a lot of people do, first of all, what if you never make it to retirement? Second of all, what if you're not in good health and you can't enjoy it? Third, what if at that point you're like, nah, I don't want to, and now you just never got to do it? We always think, like, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. But what you just said, like, I just want to challenge the part of your brain that's like, oh, you're too old. Sure, yeah, you're 55 and you have a lot of things that are like, have been patterns for a while. That's true. But you keep doing new things. You're starting a new podcast. You're changing how your business is going. So you're always doing new things. So that part of your brain that's saying you can't do new things is already wrong.
Oh, well, no, I know I can. Sometimes I try to do too many things. I guess that's probably my bigger problem. But that actually, that gets my ADD side, I guess. And I get happy when I accomplish it, but then I add something else on.
Yeah.
But yeah, but honestly, those things I mentioned are pretty big shifts for me that I want to come, I think it's going to take a little bit of time and some coaching for me to go from one place to the new direction that I want to head in.
Yeah, but it's
or
possible.
I'm already kind of there.
It's possible. Like change is possible, and it can be overwhelming. And that thought of like, oh, but I'm this age, or I've been through this amount of things, like also a common thought. But it doesn't have to be the truth. It could be the truth. You could choose for it to be the truth and be like, I'm never. You know what? I'm just going to be set in my ways. My mom is that way. I believe that she believes nothing's ever going to change, and she's always going to feel and think the way that she does. So then she's right. It's not because it's not possible. So I can't wait to just see, like, as you get more and more freedom, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying.
You're doing a great job. I think remind yourself of that too. Like, you're trying, not you're just trying, you're doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it. Every step you take is you're doing it. That's another way of like our negative voice being like, oh, I'm just trying, because then if I don't get it right, I still have safety. If you're like, I'm doing it, and then you get it wrong, that voice is like, oh, but you said you were doing it and you didn't do it right. No, I'm doing it. Like, you're doing something brave that so many people never do. It's awesome.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you. So let's get into a little bit more on number 3.
Yes. So we had a little bit of a tangent, which hopefully was still super valuable for everybody.
Yes, I tend to do that sometimes.
Me too.
Sorry about that.
No, I'm ADD, and I was
my
with you.
ADD brain going. But wait,
when you get two ADD people, the good thing is we can track with each other and be like, oh, we went all the way over here, and I'm still with you. So yeah, for number 3, so we started to talk. You were like, well, how do I know what to do first? So this is where step 3 comes in. So remember, we started with listening and then letting go. And the third step is leaping. So taking action. And always the question that you asked is the first question people ask when I say, okay, the next step is to leap, to take action. But where do I start? Because I'm looking at this entire thing and it's overwhelming. So I give people a tool it's a powerful tool that you could use for lots of things in your life. It's called the 3 in 7. So the 3 in 7 basically says, I'm going to look at everything that's in front of me, and I'm going to pick 3 small, messy actions that I can do in the next 7 days that just put me in the right direction. Small and messy is key here. So let's say, for example, you realize in your let go piece that you want to start addressing a fear that you couldn't find a job that pays you really well to do something that you love. Right? There's a fear of like, if I leave this thing I have, I won't find something better. Your 3 and 7 might be things as small as, I'm going to go on some job boards and spend an hour and just see like what's out there and let myself explore. I don't have to quit my job yet. I don't have to make the big decision. I'm just going to start exploring. And then maybe I'm going to start thinking about people I know who have done something brave in their career, and just see if I can have a conversation with one of them. And then maybe my third thing is that I'm going to find a book that tells a story. I'm just going to find the book that tells a story about somebody who made a change in their life, or listen to a podcast. I don't have to read the whole book yet. I'm just going to find it. So you make the actions really small, but if you keep doing that and you keep making 3 little steps every 7 days, after a few months, you're going to realize you really got far. Because here's the other piece. When we're making plans, usually we want to feel like, okay, I know what all the steps are to get me to my destination. But tell me in your life, when has a plan ever gone perfectly once you start doing it?
No, they don't ever go perfectly.
Ever. They never go. Because what happens when you start moving into the plan, other stuff happens. You know more information, other factors come in, whatever. Like,
the most important thing is starting.
Yes. You just have to start. And you know that because you're so great at starting things.
Yeah, and I try to get people to do, my clients do that here. Like, I don't want to start a podcast. It's too much time, or I'm afraid of speaking in public, or who's going to listen to me. I'm like, who cares? Just start. start ugly. It's okay to start ugly, because the more that you do it, the better you're going to get.
Yes.
It takes time, just like everything else.
Exactly. So that's exactly where you start. Don't worry about the whole list. Just pick 3 small things. They could be for any of the items that came up. Just pick 3 really small, messy actions to take in 7 days. As you take steps, you're going to learn other things that you didn't know before you actually took action. When it's all theoretical, it's all theoretical. You can make the most perfect plan, but when you start doing it, you find out different things, right? So giving yourself space, and you'll find in that process, you're going to be addressing some of those negative voices, like, oh, but if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. If you can't get it all done, why start? Oh, this is going to take whatever, those negative voices. Just be like, cool, you can show up again in 7 days if I don't get this done, but just take a pause for 7 days. So that's step 3. So listen, let go, and leap.
I think that's all great advice. I love all 3 of those steps. And I think that's something that, the podcast audience is something that they can really listen to that and really start practicing some of those things.
Yeah.
What is a place where they can go to get more information, to learn more about some of these things that you've said? Do you have a website, guidebooks, articles, a coaching class,
Yes.
something that you can lead them to?
For sure. So I'm going to create a link specifically for your listeners. So I'll get that to you so you can put that like in the show notes. That will let people go to a space to be able to take, it's called a saboteur assessment. And that helps to identify like the negative voices that are happening in their head. So it gives names to those things. So it asks a series of questions and will tell you the results of that. So that in and of itself is a valuable tool. But also,
Lexi's joining our podcast.
Hello,
here.
Lexi. What do you have to say about that? Do you want to take the assessment?
She's like, I need that too.
Like, you guys are talking and I'm not a part of it. So I want to come up. I understand. I get it.
So there's an assessment that people can take?
Yep, there's an assessment. And then I'll also have on that link a place that they can schedule a call with me to go through their assessment. So free call for 30 minutes. We'll go through your assessment once you've taken it and talk about like where that saboteur voice is showing up for you. So I'll do that specifically for your audience. If people want to know just in general, like what I do and how to work with me, Design Your Detour is my website. So Design Your Detour, spelled design, your, and detour, which we can also add to put in the show notes. So that has the general information about what I do and how I work with people.
Okay. I love the fact that you have that assessment there for people just to try, and you can reach them and have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I think it's powerful when we can start putting names to things that have been happening, but we aren't even aware of them yet. So it's a great first step that people can take to be like, okay, what's really holding me back here? And how is this voice, this negative, judgy voice, that's my biggest critic, how might that be keeping me from doing the things I want to do?
No, I think that's awesome. And I think we've covered so much in the show, and I think I've opened up more in this. I mean, I open up a lot in my podcast, but not quite like this. So kind of felt good to get that out.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you felt like you could open up, and I know that that's creating space for listeners to also feel okay to say things.
You also make it really easy to talk to, by the way.
Well, thank you.
It's that very comforting feeling when I'm with you that allows me to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm so glad to be able to do that. I think we need more like open, non-judgmental spaces in our lives.
We do. And I think that's been was my mission from now until I pass, is that I just want to be able to talk more and try to give back to other people.
It's incredible. I really admire that about you.
I wish I would have had that, during my journey.
Yes. That's somebody who could have
It was
said
rough.
to you.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's this stuff that you just don't talk about or tell people,
Yep. Yeah. And generationally too, like
That's just a generation thing.
we didn't. And it's not that it doesn't exist anymore, but with every generation, I think it gets a little bit less like, don't talk about hard things or don't talk about negative things.
Yeah. Sometimes a little too much out there right now. People talking, hey, tone it down a little bit. A little too much.
I didn't need to know that.
Yeah, way too much information. It's like a little even keel and all that. But anyway, so if you want more information, I'm going to have everything on Kelly in the show notes so you can check everything out there. And you please contact her. She is fabulous. I love you. I think she'll really be able to help you. Again, as you saw, she's so easy to talk to. And thank you so much for being on my show today. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
you.
me. I had such a good time.
I did too. And thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week on Learning Curves. Bye.
Second Soul Studios is a full-service production studio with capabilities for photo, video, podcasting, editing, co-working, and more. Our photo video studio has a number of different backdrop choices and props to choose from.
Our team at CEA has tons of experience and top-notch training, which helps you take all the stress and confusion out of marketing your own business. After years of working with large companies like Pulte Homes and Metro Places, we guarantee the successful implementation of a marketing strategy.